Hi guys, Sandy Ingram here. Welcome. This is a special report on Cuba. Here's what you may want to know. When the U.S. went in to get Maduro in Venezuela, 32 of Cuban citizens were killed in the attack. Now, Trump has officially warned other governments that they will receive tariffs if they send oil to Cuba. In other words, our president is putting the screws to Cuba. He's cutting them off. Mexico has stopped sending oil to Cuba, and so has other countries. They don't have anyone that can come in and help them, and the situation has gotten so bad that aircraft full of tourists arrived on the Cuban island, and the aircraft itself was not able to leave because Cuba does not have any oil or fuel to refuel the aircrafts. So this is very, very serious. Plus, we are hearing about food shortages and medical shortages. Now, Cuba is in talks with the United States. And I can truly tell you, I don't have a clue what's going to happen. But this is what we know for sure. Anytime that a country gets into trouble, we as currency investors want to take a look to see if it is a currency that we would feel comfortable in investing in. Now, based upon the overview report on Cuba, buying Cuba's pesos is not a good idea at this time. However, buying Cuba real estate, that may be a different story. One thing you want to be sure of is that if you go to Cuba and you try to use your ATM card in an ATM machine in Cuba, the bank, if you have an American bank, more than likely shut your account down. So be aware that there is disruption financially. You want to take a look and a listen at the voiceover that I'm going to play for you in a second to understand the potential or the possibilities of the Cuban peso.
Cuba. The AP says 2 Mexican Navy ships of humanitarian aid docked in Cuba today as a U.S. blockade deepens the island's energy crisis. The ships arrived 2 weeks after President Trump threatened tariffs on any country selling or providing oil to Cuba, prompting the island to ration energy in recent days. Cuba's president says that transportation, hospitals, schools, tourism, and the production of food are being impacted by the United States. Cuban aviation officials say there isn't enough fuel for airplanes to refuel on the island, and the Mexican government's aid ships are carrying loads of food and personal hygiene items.
Is Cuba's currency the next currency to buy? What investors should know.
Cuba is once again making headlines, not because of growth or reform, but because the island is facing one of its deepest economic crises in decades. Severe fuel shortages, shrinking tourism, infrastructure failures, and tightening sanctions are putting enormous pressure on the country's economy. For speculative investors who look for distressed opportunities, this raises an important question. Could Cuba's currency eventually become a turnaround story, or is it simply too risky to consider?
At the moment, Cuba's economy is under intense strain. The country is experiencing a significant fuel crisis that has disrupted transportation, electricity generation, and even air travel. Rolling blackouts and shortages of medicine and food are becoming common. Tourism, one of Cuba's most important sources of foreign currency, is struggling as travel disruptions grow and infrastructure problems worsen. These factors matter for currency investors because the value of any currency ultimately depends on confidence, exports, and access to foreign capital. Right now, Cuba is struggling in all three areas.
The Cuban peso itself has been losing value rapidly on the informal market, reflecting both inflation and a lack of trust in the currency. As the peso weakens, many Cubans rely more heavily on US dollars or other foreign currencies for savings and major purchases. When an economy begins shifting toward informal dollarization, it often signals that the local currency is losing its role as a store of value. This is typically a warning sign rather than an investment opportunity.
Another major issue is that Cuba's financial system is largely closed to international investors. Currency speculation normally requires open banking channels, tradable markets, and transparent monetary policy. Cuba does not provide these conditions. U.S. sanctions restrict many types of financial transactions involving Cuba, and the country's internal monetary policies lack the transparency global investors typically require. Even if someone believed the peso might recover one day, there are currently very few practical ways to invest in it.
Some long-term macro investors still watch Cuba for one reason: the possibility of future normalization. If relations with the United States improved and Cuba opened its economy to foreign investment, the island could potentially see a surge in tourism, infrastructure funding, and economic reform. In that scenario, the currency might stabilize or even strengthen over time. We have seen similar economic transformations in countries like Vietnam after they adopted market reforms and reconnected with global trade. However, those changes required significant political and economic restructuring, and there is no clear timeline for such reforms in Cuba.
The key question for investors is not whether a currency has fallen dramatically, but whether there is a realistic path to recovery. At present, Cuba's economy is shrinking, its infrastructure is strained, and its financial system remains largely isolated. Those conditions usually signal a currency to avoid rather than accumulate.
For now, the Cuban peso appears less like a speculative opportunity and more like a reflection of a struggling economy under pressure. Until Cuba stabilizes its energy supply, restores investor confidence, and opens its financial system, the peso remains extremely high risk and largely untradeable for most investors.